hire and fire and change job descriptions much more easily than you can in government. And so that may be a longer path for governments to go through this because of that.
Well, and then let's talk about business organizations. In comparison to education, in comparison to government, you've talked about their additional flexibility in moving people around. Are there considerations in using these keys that we need to consider in dealing with a commercial or a business entity?
You have the one additional issue with a business, and that is that they, in essence, have to make money. Short-term or long-term, they still have to make money. And with that orientation, that's a marvelous way of focusing the mind. Mr. Johnson had an interesting analogy, English historical figure, and he said, nothing so focuses the mind as the thought of being hung in the morning. And that's the perspective, in essence, if you're working for a for-profit company. You have to generate those numbers so that you can put that money that you make back into the business and make more money. Unfortunately, you can go so far in that direction that one has such a short-term focus that you don't look at the longer-term perspective that may help you create a longer profitability and a longer string of profitability numbers because you're so focused on the next quarter's bottom line.
Let me ask you one more question, and then we'll go and we'll take questions from our viewers. These can be rather large organizations that you're dealing with, educational, governmental, even business. What is the difference in trying to apply these keys or techniques to a specific department within an organization as opposed to the organization as a whole?
Okay. That really boils down to the question in the equation of success, what we talked about earlier, in terms of the degree of control. If you have a manufacturing plant, and that even though they may be part of a large organization, they have control over how they get paid, who they pay, how to change their work processes, they're going to be a whole lot freer to make significant changes than, for example, if you're talking about a functional department that is just responsible for engineering drawings. In that case, they may be able to improve their own process, but dealing with that cross-functional issue, all right, is something that they'll have greater difficulty. So if you're a functional department within a large organization, you probably will be pretty constrained in terms of what you can do.
That was great, David. Thanks. Let us continue now with the second question and answer session. Our first call is from Mexico. It is from the Instituto Tecnológico Latinoamericano. It's in Pachuca, which is in the state of Hidalgo in the country of Mexico.
What process do you recommend for evaluating an educational institution?
Often educational institutions, what they do is they ask students at the end of the course, how do you like the course? Do you think the materials are useful? And frankly, I think a much more useful kind of measure is to find out on how successful those students are in finding jobs in their own training field, where they've got their own degree. So, for example, to go to your engineering students 3, 4, 5, 6 years from now and ask them, was your education useful? What part wasn't useful? What part did you use and what part didn't you use? And I think that's a much better success for educational institutions than the immediate, hi, did you like the class kind of feedback what we so often get at universities.
Okay. Our next call is from Mexico. It is from the Instituto Tecnológico Superior de la Sierra Norte de Puebla in Zacatlán, the city of Zacatlán, in the state of Puebla, in the Republic of Mexico.
Good morning. How to ensure that the system used to evaluate is efficient? And how do you know that the evaluator is objective?
That's a darn good question. Again, it's really a process of consensus and measurement, and to push as much as you can, though it's hard to do, that what you are measuring is visible, is seeable, is something that you can see and touch and smell if at all possible. I know it's very often hard to do in organizations, but to push it as much as you can. As far as an outside perspective is concerned, one has to ask, frankly, whether the customers that that particular person has had before, whether that person has given them good information that at the same time still pushes them to succeed more. Any auditor can come into an organization and say everything is wonderful. However, it's the hallmark of a good auditor to say that you're doing well, but you have these particular kind of problems and you have to work on these particular kind of issues.
We have another call from Mexico, and I'm not certain exactly which institution. Perhaps the caller can tell us from which institution he or she is calling.
De la Universidad del Valle de Matatipac, de Tepic, Nayarit. La pregunta es la siguiente.
From Universidad del Valle, how to evaluate teamwork that have discontinued and fragmented activity because the needs change, and so the teamwork has to change with the variation of needs. How do you evaluate that?
You can evaluate teamwork from a couple of different perspectives. One perspective is in terms of the success of an individual team, team by team by team, so that they go through their own evaluation process, not as a large-scale kind of issue, but actually in terms of how that particular team was successful. The other particular way to look at it is to be looking at the overall organization in terms of employee surveys, in terms of looking at absenteeism and turnover data, in terms of the number of cross-functional teams that are working on projects, that kind of thing. That might give you some good measures of success as far as teamwork across the organization.
Let me ask one more question. In your discussion, you mentioned that the choice of techniques depends on the desired type of organizational change. How does this factor into formation of vision and goal setting?
Vision and goal setting, frankly, when organizations do it, often do it too late, to my mind, because they don't have a firm grasp in terms of what the alternative futures might be. They haven't gone through this scenario planning piece, the level 1 kind of change. And so what they often do is they often come up with a vision that is independent of what might be occurring in the future. And so, to my mind, the visioning statement, the visioning piece, is the most important as a second stage, not as a first stage in terms of organizational change. Because one's vision for the company may differ substantially depending upon what particular scenario plays out.
I'm going to ask you one more question about the next book you're going to do. You've talked about the frustration which has led you to write the book that's in print right now. You've talked a little bit about the important factors in that. What's the next book going to be?
I think that the next book is actually going to be a series of 4 books. What I mean by that is that No More Darn Buzzwords covers the 4 keys, but it really is speaking just one book. And so there are 4 sections in the book dealing with each key. Where the next phase really is in terms of taking each of those keys and providing more detail, more case studies, more examples. And so one has the overall framework in terms of what needs to be done, but one also has the significant detail as to how to achieve that particular key.
Would it be presumptuous of me to assume that as you do the research on the 4 new books that you're going to write, that some of the research will be done in developing countries, in Latin American countries, so we are not going to see only examples from Western Europe and the United States?
I sincerely hope so. Even within No More Darn Buzzwords, there are examples, for example, in terms of dealing with my Middle Eastern clients and how they dealt with this particular kind of scenario. Because this is not a U.S.-led kind of thing. It really is a very cross-national kind of issue, because organizational change is global, and that in essence is that the examples have to be from a global perspective.
Our next call is from Mexico. It is from the Universidad Autónoma de Baja California Sur. It's in the city of La Paz in the state of Baja California Sur in the Republic of Mexico.
Sí, bueno. No tenemos preguntas nosotros ahorita.
We really don't have any questions right now. We wanted to congratulate you on the program and on this presentation.
Oh, thank you very much.
Before we go, let me just ask one last question. And that is, we've talked about organizations in the United States, organizations in Latin America. We see increasingly multinational institutions, organizations, businesses that span many cultures, that are not just American, they're not just Latin American, they're not just European, but they have operations in all three portions of the world, and maybe in Asia. Are there any special considerations that the multinational manager needs to take into account in trying to deal with all these various aspects?
To be honest, I feel pity for a manager that has to deal with 4, 5, and 6 cultures at one time. It takes a tremendous amount of discipline and a tremendous amount of energy just to achieve that. And my only piece of advice actually is just continually check and make sure that what you think is going to happen is actually going to happen. We've done cross-national team building efforts in a number of different organizations, and it's just amazing the assumptions that what people make when they communicate with one another. And the more continually you communicate in terms of what you need to do and keep on trying to improve what you're doing, the better off that you're going to be.
Sometimes the greatest challenges are the most rewarding once you achieve the result. We have
That's
one
for sure.
last question, and that is from Mexico. It's from the Universidad Liceo Cervantino. It is in the city of Irapuato, in the state of Guanajuato, in the Republic of Mexico.
Bien, buenos días.
Good morning.
Para un consultor que se dedica a cuestiones de calidad, ¿cómo hacer
For
entender a las organizaciones
people
que el proceso
consulting
se hizo,
about
es
quality
únicamente una
process,
estandarización? Y
how
cómo
do you
comprender
make
también que un
people
módulo de
understand that
calidad
ISO
es lo que realmente
9000
permite el poder establecer las bases para luego
is just a way of standardizing quality, and you have other ways of dealing with quality.
And I have to very much agree with you. ISO 9000 is a good way of standardizing measurements and processes and their documentation, and that it is no more and no less than that. And that's kind of the main effort. One needs to achieve the understanding that ISO has a good place in the organization, but it can't be the sole driver of change in the organization as far as quality is concerned.
Is ISO 9000 going to go away, or is it here to stay?
I have my questions. They just recently put out a number of different variations of the standard for the automobile industry, for the aerospace industry, and so on. And so the standard as a unified standard may go away. You may just have industry-specific kind of standards, and that may be more relevant than the overall global ISO 9000 certification.
I want to thank everybody for the excellent questions that we've had today. But we've run out of time. We hope that you have enjoyed participating once again in this exciting multilingual and multinational program. We invite you to participate in the 5th video conference in this year's series, airing May 8, 2003, entitled Managing as a Leader, Decision-Making with Mind and Heart. For additional information on this video conference series, please consult your participants' manual, where you will find the dates and specific topics for each program. You may also visit our website at itc-group.org. On behalf of all of us, I thank you for your ongoing participation and interest in this program. Thank you, and see you again soon.